2, 3.
You from
Is that
Welland?
me?
That's
No,
you.
She wrote my name down.
Oh, there you go. So that's you. You
Okay,
get a
cool, look.
position there, okay? How's that? Can everybody hear me okay? All right, awesome. So we're going to, as we're sort of shopping around, we're going to have a bit of a presentation here. We're honored to have Vince Gircys here talking about a very important subject. I think we are all kind of getting little bits of information on, don't really know exactly how it's going to affect us, but it's in the works for sure. So before I introduce Vince, I just wanted to...
Everyone be quiet, please.
It's okay if we're browsing around, if we just keep our voices down a little bit so that we can listen to the speaker and we can move forward. So just a couple of things. As you may or may not know or may have seen from our emails, CSA is transitioning to Niagara People Helping People, and only because CSA is there's so many letters that start with organizations that are under CSA. So we are going to be building a private member association under Niagara People Helping People, and what that means is we're going to keep our organization in the private, protecting our community and what we're doing in the community. So you'll see emails, and if you're not on our email list, please do let me know, and I can add you to our email list. We have a community events calendar that I will be emailing out. It has all our events from December until June, and not including the one-offs here and there that we'll be doing. If you haven't gotten a draw ticket yet, we do have a basket that we'll be drawing for at 4 p.m. And the tickets are $2 or $3 for $5. And I also have a draw. There's no cost on it, but you can just put your name in for either a bioresonance session or a neuroptimal session. So you're welcome to do that as well. So CSA Niagara People Helping People. Just wanted to kind of tell you what our plans are. We're launching 3 new initiatives, and they are the Hands to Table Food Network, they are Healing Hands, and Helping Hands. 3 different type of community initiatives that will be focused on bringing the community together as we move through the times that we're coming through. So I have further information on how we're developing these. We are looking for volunteers to help us launch these, to really ground our support for these initiatives, especially the food, Hands to Table Food Network. As we know, our food system is very questionable. So I think it's really important as a community, we get together and we do have our own markets. We, even if it's little gardens here and there supporting one another, I think it's really important. We know what we're eating, and if we buy in bulk as well, like if we will get better pricing, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the initiatives we help. The Helping Hands is about people in need. Somebody's sick, somebody maybe goes and you inspired this when you broke your feet. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this poor lady with 2 broken feet, she can't cook, she can't do anything. We need to help each other as a community. So the Helping Hands is really about bringing people together and supporting one another in the community. And of course, the Healing Hands, we have a network of healers, tincture makers, alchemists, or whatever you want to call them, energetic products, technologies within our own community. And we all know that the visit to the doctor and the hospital isn't as pleasant as what it may have been in the past. So we really want to strengthen that within our community and know that each one of us has support in those areas. So those are the initiatives we're building. So please put your name on the email on the mailing list for further information. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Vince here to talk about one of the pressing things that are kind of on people's minds, and that's digital ID, but that's only the beginning of it with everything going through. And I think everyone here is probably familiar with Vince and his, what he's gone through and what the initiatives you're doing. I know you talked about, you have a podcast. You can let us know what that is, and if we can all help spread the word, because I think he's sharing some great information out there. You've been with the NCI and doing work there, which is huge. There's a lot of great things coming out of that. But I'll let you continue, Vince, and thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Can you hear me at the back? Yeah. Okay, so I'll try this without the mic, so we'll keep it a little more personal and less echoey. I'm going to probably cover a couple subjects, and if you have any questions, just feel free to ask at the end. So my background I think I recognize a lot of people here that I've probably seen over the last 5 years during the COVID era. So my background was a police officer working in this area with the OPP I started in Toronto, so I did 32 years of policing with the OPP, and then I was retired, and when COVID came along, I was already awake to a lot of the lies and nonsense in the media, a lot of propaganda taking place in Canada. And so I became very outspoken and aware of a lot of the things that our government and our health agencies are talking about that were quite wrong, untrue, deceptive, and then the censorship mechanism that kicked in and started censoring us all. And so our group started to form, and somebody from a Niagara group somehow found my contact information and reached out to me and asked me to come to their group meeting. And I was surprised there were 250 people meeting in a church hall somewhere in 2021 during the second phase of lockdown. And I thought, that's great. People, I'm not the only one that thinks this way. And so here we are 5 years later, people still aware of what's going on and all the problems. I really thought that we would be beyond that in 3 years. We would get past that in 3 years. We just had to wait 3 years and things will go back to normal. But they're not going to go back to normal. And if you take a look around this room, there's something you're going to notice right away that is very obvious when I come to these types of meetings. There's no young people here. There's no children here. There's no youth here. And there never has.
I am.
Oh, okay. Okay, here you go. So, that's great. Do you drive a car? you have kids?
I just got my license.
Okay. So it's very, very rare that we ever find any youth here, and I think it's due to two reasons. So first of all, it's because of your age. I'm going to actually kick out three. So in your age, you recall what happened way back when you were young, when you were a kid. You understand the history of this nation. You understand what it was like before the digital age. You understand what life could be like in the other life, the past life, the 1970s, when things were pretty fun, right? And a lot of times you reminisce and wish you can go back to the 70s and like, how did we get here? This was supposed to be better, and it's not getting better. It's getting worse. We see that by the fact that your grocery bills are going up. We see that by the fact that your children or your grandchildren can't get a job, can't find a job, because now we have this completely inverted immigration system. And I would say probably the majority of people in this room, myself included, come from immigration, come from a family of people who immigrated to this country, but most likely for all of us, that was under a different process. It was under a merit-based process where you would immigrate to the country because you brought value to the country. You could speak the language, you brought some money, you worked a certain profession that this country needed, you had an education, and or you were willing to take on work that nobody else in this country would take on. And that's why when you hear the stories from previous generations of who built this nation and how it was built, what the Italians did, what the Polish did, who was good in the concrete trades, who was good in the construction trades, all this kind of stuff, that you brought value to this nation, and very, very few of the people who came to this nation actually dug into the employment system, what they call back then the unemployment insurance, and or the social systems that we paid into our whole lives that most of us never drew from. And we created this safety net. We created the build in the technology of the healthcare system that we have. And now, of course, the system's overloaded, and the immigration system's completely different. It's no longer merit-based. It's a whole different system. So I'm here to talk to you about digital ID, but I'm gonna I always make analogies. My sister is over here. She's come with me to this meeting. I'm blessed because my entire family is awake to what's really going on, and that's a blessing in itself. So I like to sometimes talk about this because it's going to paint a mental picture for this. So lock systems, I want to start off with locks. So locks, you want to buy a lock for something and you want a really strong lock. And you think, what's the best lock? Because I need a lock for my bicycle, or I need a lock for my gate on my house. And some companies would sell you, the pick-proof lock. And we've come to realize over time, there's no such thing as the pick-proof lock. There isn't a lock that exists on the market that can't be picked and using different forms of energy, whether it's heat or pneumatic energy, that lock can't be broken, cut, or somehow, you can get into it. So they no longer sell locks as the pick-proof lock. Now it's, this one would take longer to break into. That's what it is now, right? So you buy a lock based on which one is going to take the person the longest to break into, and eventually they'll get frustrated and they'll just leave because before they can break into the lock, the neighbor's already calling the police, right? So there's no such thing as the pick-proof lock. And I say that because when I'm going to be talking about digital ID, people are thinking, how do we get out of this system? How do we fight back? How do we not get into this? How do we prevent that from happening? And unfortunately, as the bearer of bad news, I'm going to say that my background was in electronics engineering technology before I started in policing. And I could say where we have come from the 70s into the digital world in the 90s, there's no going back at this point. We're not going back to an analog world. We think that we could, but in fact, we cannot stop the process that is in place that is going to be coming. And we think we can avoid it by, I'll give you an example. We'd like to live like the Amish, because they can do it, right? No, not anymore. I've researched the Amish community, and I know a lot of Amish people out in Western Ontario. And so one thing I've learned about the Amish is how do they exist staying out of the digital realm? Well, first of all, the Amish is like calling you a Christian. There are very facets of Christianity. There's Protestantism, there's Catholics, there's evangelists, there's Anglicans. So in the Amish community, the Amish still do not use computers and are not in the digital world in their homes. But in their businesses, they're all in the digital world now. And they're in the digital world because it just makes sense to them. If they build or manufacture a product or have a certain lifestyle or agricultural systems, whether it's eggs or farming, they realize they can get to access a bigger market by advertising online and posting online in their communities. And it's really good for business for them. But they still don't bring that technology home for their children, but they utilize it for business. And I can think of a whole bunch of Amish businesses that I'm familiar with in furniture production and wood production, that and they even do welding, where you're able to communicate with them and get their services, and it works to their advantage. So how are they going to function in this new digital age of mandatory ID? I don't know. I don't know how that whole thing's going to transform. Nobody knows. But one thing we do know is it's happening on a global scale. It's happening in every country. If you think you can go into the United States and get away from it, they're talking about doing it as well. If you think Russia's not going to do it, and that's a completely different country that is not playing the same game, no, they're talking about doing it as well. Well, why would they do that? Well, because it's a benefit to every nation to not only control their population, and all leaderships of all nations would like to control, or at least have some form of control over their population, but it also provides them with a tremendous amount of information who belongs in this nation, who does not belong in this nation. It's the tracking of the entire population base. And anyone who's in control within governance, they love that, and they love that concept. And they don't want to hear from you. Democracy as we know it is, I cannot have an argument with anybody on democracy and have them prove to me that democracy still exists. It doesn't. It is on its way out. If democracy is representation of the people for the people, we do have representatives, but we don't have actual representation. And as a parent, if you're a parent and you still have school-age children, which most of us have grandchildren now, you'll find that the schools do not want to talk to the parents. The schools do not want your input as a parent. They're already running their processes and they don't care what you think. So as a chairman of the National Citizens Inquiry, I can tell you my eyes were really open. So first of all the information that the National Citizens Inquiry has is available online. You can see all the videos of all the interviews. They all exist online at the National Citizens Inquiry, so just look it up, it's there. The first 2 years of the National Citizens Inquiry, they were holding hearings all across Canada about the whole COVID era, and they wanted to hear from anybody who wanted to testify and give an interesting story. And a lot of those stories came from doctors and nurses and people in the healthcare field. And I myself testified at the NCI in the second phase of testimony the first year. And there were hundreds of professional testimonies. After the first 2 years, they pretty much got the stories that they needed from Canadians across Canada. The hearings traveled from one side of the country to the other. They did it 1 year and then they did it the second year in 2023 and 2024. So in 2025, they changed the subject and they said, okay, they've written a report on the whole COVID era and all the truth from former media broadcasters, doctors, lawyers, nurses, professionals. Everyone got to tell their story of the lies and the bullshit and the deception and the corruption of what took place. So it's all collected, and it is now the world's largest collection of professional testimony that has ever taken place. And those first 2 years of testimony are combined in a book that's about this thick. You can buy a book, or you can access it through a PDF file online, and you can read it. You can read. So what happens is the commissioners, there's a table of 4 people sitting up on a platform listening to a witness testifying. And the witness has 45 minutes to unpack their story. And the commissioners get to ask them as many questions as they want for clarification, to clarify the story. At the end of the year, the commissioners get together and they write the report. And it's the totality of all that was said comes in this big report. Here's what it says. And it's very, very damaging to the government. This year, the subject changed to, are children safe in Canada? That was the question. And so I became a commissioner in May of this year, and I was at the hearings in Kitchener, Ontario, and then I went to the hearings in November in Brandon, Manitoba. And so I was responsible for interviewing about 60 people as commissioner at those 2 hearings. And I have to say, so I'm the youngest commissioner, or the newest commissioner, and I was shocked at what I was hearing. I'm shocked at the testimony of things like surrogacy. Would you know that Canada is the #1 country in the world for buying and selling babies? Because there's no law against it in Canada. And you know who the #1 person is that's buying the babies? Homosexual male partners. And it's perfectly legal in Canada. In other countries, they've created a law that says you can't do that. So you can't do it here, can't do it there, might not be able to do it there, but everybody now knows that in Canada, yeah, go to Canada. So women will come to Canada to have the infants, and people from around the world will come here to buy the infants. This is the mecca for surrogacy. Anyways, when you hear people unpack that story, it's unbelievable. And then so you hear this. And then you hear the next witness talking about full-term abortion in Canada. You say, what are you talking about? That doesn't happen here. Yes, in Alberta alone, there were 26 or 27 cases of full-term abortion. An attempted abortion that didn't work, the baby is born full-term, and then they abandon the infant at birth in the hospital and leave it until it dies. 26 times. That is actually happening in Canada. You can't believe that. This is my country. This happens. This is the kind of stuff you hear at the NCI. And it goes on and on. It's very, very hard to listen to this testimony. So the testimony is now over, and for this year, the NCI, the commissioners are going to prepare the report on these and many more topics and submit our 2025 report. The NCI is now asking people online, if you go to their website, what would you like the topic or the subject to be for next year, for 2026? So in 2026, I'm a commissioner, but I do not belong on the board. I'm not a board member. I don't control what the NCI does. So I'm sort of a judge that sits on the panel, but I don't make their decisions. And I said, if you're going to ask me as a citizen, my opinion is to delve into the justice system in Canada, because we have a huge problem where the rule of law no longer exists. The preamble of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms says that where it says the Canadian Charter of Rights is based upon the supremacy of God and the rule of law. The rule of law means that every person in this country gets treated the same before the law in the justice system. So you get treated exactly the same as a judge or a politician or a police officer. We all get treated the same. And that's great. That's the principle that we have in Canada. In reality, that does not work. It does not work that way. And time again, we have seen that it doesn't work. So I became involved in something called the Gircys Justice Project. I actually started it along with another police officer and a lawyer and Ted Kuntz from Vaccine Choice Canada and a few other people. So we created something called the Gircys Justice Project. Detective Helen Grus was a officer who still works in Ottawa Police. And in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, when the vaccines were initially rolled out, Detective Grus is a member of the StarKap unit. That's the Sexual Assault Child Abuse Unit. So her job is dealing with victims of sexual assault and when children die, when infants die. That's her job. And she noticed a 200 to 300% spike in infants that were dying very quickly over a short period of time. And she started to ask questions. She did not initiate an investigation. She just started asking questions. And she received the Pfizer data, the preliminary Pfizer report that said out of a test of something like 200 women, they received test results of 33. They don't talk about the rest, they just talk about 33. And they said 32 out of 33 resulted in stillbirths. Okay, think of the number. We only have 33 results, but 32 out of 33 of them, the infants were stillborn. That's got to tell you something about vaccinated moms. Like, when all your babies are dying, there's a problem. So the detective started talking about that and saying, I think there's a correlation here. She was immediately pulled out of that investigation, investigated, eventually charged, wiretapped. They unlawfully wiretapped her phone. They investigated her. So we created something called the Gircys Justice Project to tell her stories. And her trial lasted 3 years, and the police service refused to allow her. She had 7 expert witnesses who were going to testify that everything she believed was actually correct. But they would not allow any of her expert witnesses to testify. They would not allow her to introduce any evidence to defend herself. They would not allow her to speak when it came to anything to do with anything medical at her trial. So now we have a police service covering up for why infants are dying in Canada following vaccination. So it's gotten so bad that we created this Gircys Justice Project, created a website to bring attention to this, and then started fundraising for a documentary film called Silencing Detective Grus. And we've already personally paid for the trailer to be produced, and it's already out there. And I'll send it to Sandra, and Sandra can put it out to your group to see the trailer. So we're looking to fundraise, and we want to do a full-length feature documentary to tell the story of how health agencies working with the government, working in hand with police agencies to silence, and working with the media to completely silence this conversation about why infants are dying in Canada. So I know I got a little sidetracked here. I'm just giving you a bit of background information so you know what's going on in the country. Yes?
I thought it was nursing mothers whose babies died.
It was just pregnant mothers. It was pregnant women who had been vaccinated.
They were labeling it SIDS, sudden-infant deaths.
Yeah, I'm not sure of how they were labeling
Yeah.
it, but on the Pfizer report, it said of the study. So when that was taken into a courtroom in the U.S. and a judge said what happened to the other 150 cases, and Pfizer said we don't know, and the judge said I'm ordering you to go and look and tell us, because if you're just reporting on 33 and 32 of the infants died, that's a big problem. So I'm going to shift now back. I just kind of got sidetracked there to give you my background of what I'm involved in. So back to digital identification. So with digital ID, you have to understand that in Canada, so I'm very biased when it comes to the justice system. I came from the justice system. I'm now fighting for justice. I now see injustice. I see it blatantly from facets of major police, from my previous police organization as tied to similar events, the Ottawa Police Service, the RCMP, and other major police services in the country have done the same thing. What just came out in the last week from a guy by the name of Mark Sexton from the UK. So he had been going to police services. He's a former police officer. He had been going to major police services in the UK during the COVID era and providing reports about the dangers of these vaccines, and they all brushed him off. Well, he recently discovered that there was a project that was taking place. Every time there's some big action in policing, they call it project something, okay? They give it a name. Well, there was a project that was in place during COVID where orders came down for all police services in the UK to not accept any papers or documents from anybody having to do with COVID. Don't talk to people about it. Don't accept their papers. They want to hand you something. They want to show you some information. Don't look at it. So now that's just come out, okay? So the world is waking up to what the hell is going on and how is it that that was possible? So when we talk about the rule of law, you can clearly see here that we as citizens are not being protected when health agencies run amok or run rogue. So how are things going to pan out if we start to move to a digital identification type of a system? So what I highly recommend to people when I've talked to other groups is exactly what you're doing now. Unfortunately, your group needs to grow. You need to have your own group. You have to have your own group within society such that you can be as independent as possible. The notion of having a digital ID that's eventually tied to some form of digital currency like central bank digital currency or some other form of digital currency is a control mechanism, and we're all very worried and we're saying, I don't want to be part of this control mechanism, right? But at some point you stop looking at the bigger picture of something you can't control and you look more within to yourself, of making yourself as independent as possible. And the only way you can fight anything is when people come together. And as I say to a lot of people, we all have a different perspective on something. What your priority might be is not the same as mine, and what your priority might be is not the same as his or hers. But whatever it is, whatever you think is the big important thing, you better know it really well. You better, if it's that important to you, you should understand it very fluidly. It should just come natural to you. And so if you're going to have that conversation with other people, I'm very critical and I'm very objective, and that's my police background. So when someone throws something at me, I call bullshit. It's like, prove it. Bullshit, prove it. What about this? What about that? And when people can, when they keep going and they're like, yeah, I have the answer, I have the answer, I have the answer, it's very convincing. But if someone calls you on something that you're talking about and you're like, I don't know, I heard it from somebody, it's not very convincing, right? So not only do you have to work on your like hobby is your main area of concern, you have to work on delivery. And I've just kind of recently come up with a word that I thought of today. It was like, I think I just invented a word. And it's called, a word I came up with is called digital hearsay. So the word hearsay in court is when I tell you something and now you go and you tell someone you know what I said. So it's not coming directly from her. It's, well, she's just like repeating the story that you heard from someone else. Well, in the courtroom, hearsay is very limited to how it can come out in a courtroom. Because if you're going to say something in a courtroom where I question you on something, you need to be able to give me answers. But if you refer to, I don't know, I just heard it from this person, it doesn't carry any weight. It's like, well, you can't cross-examine on that. And in the digital realm, that's why I came up with this idea today, is we watch a lot of videos and we absorb a lot of video content. And so what you see in a video or video content, you're gonna believe, and you're gonna start repeating it to a lot of people you know. And it doesn't carry as much weight if it's, oh, I saw this video and this is what it said. Oh, really? Well, explain it to me in detail. Well, I can't, because I just saw the video, right? But when you do your own research on a subject and you can unpack all the details on that subject, it just, you become really good at it. You become very expertise on that subject if it's something you're very passionate about. So it could be, your subject could be the educational system because your kids are in school. And you've discovered through, especially through the NCI, you can discover a lot of information and detail in there that as long as you absorb it, take notes, make note of it, understand it, then when you're having this conversation with somebody about how broken the educational system is, you can start repeating clear facts and details where somebody starts questioning you and they'll say, wow, you really know what you're talking about. So we all need to educate ourselves about what's really going on specifically in detail. Because if we start having the conversation more about this thing out here on the fringe, and we can't really articulate it well, it's not going to be received well. So that's why I've learned since the beginning of this, I stay in the justice lane because that's my background. And I've seen sometimes when doctors try to go into a certain field, whether they want to talk about chemtrails or 5G or something else, they'll put their toe into that field and immediately it gets cut off. It's like, do you understand this? Do you know this? What's this? And then they start to fall apart. And they go, I don't know, I just heard about it. I saw a video on it. You know, so they learn, don't go there unless you really want to go there. You want to absorb it and you really want to understand it and be able to unpack it. I've been in so many meetings with so many groups across Canada. There's one that happens every Friday, and there's, you know, up to 500 people on this meeting on a Friday. And everybody wants to talk about something. There's no shortage of, you know, this is a problem. Oh, this is a problem. Oh, this is a problem. And before you know it, we're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of problems. And a lot of people want to talk about the Constitution that was written in 1867. It wasn't written in the proper color. This part was not underlined, and this part was not capitalized. It's like, are we really gonna talk about that? Is that really important, considering how many things we're really dealing with right now? How the rule of law doesn't exist in this country? How all of the money that we outsource out of the country for whatever nation, anywhere, is being laundered? All of it, billions of dollars. It's like a vacuum cleaner. It's just going to other nations, being laundered back in through back channels. And none of our politicians have our best interest. And now Native issues are coming up so fast right now. We're on the verge of a color revolution in this country where Natives are going to declare all their lands back. And it's happening daily.
That's on the UN agenda. It's the UN that has established that.
The UN is like the catalyst that started it, but it was a court ruling in British Columbia that actually said, yes, the Natives are entitled to this land, that set off, once you have a court ruling like that, it's like
We've been infiltrated with court rulings for a very long time now.
Yeah, we have, absolutely.
And we're supposed to carry the law. Each individual carries the law.
Well, we don't carry the law, but we live by the rules, we live by the law, we live by the rule of law, and ultimately our laws are really based, if you go far back enough, our laws are really based on natural law. but we don't at all adhere or abide by natural law. But the natural law is, we can go back as far as the 10 Commandments and say, I like that. You know, we got 10 basic rules, and even if we whittled it down to 5 or 2, I don't take your stuff, you don't take my stuff, and I don't cause you any grief or harm, and you don't cause me any grief or harm.
There's equity law that a lot of people are learning, individuals are learning, because every judge in the country knows equity law. And if you go in there totally knowing what equity law means and does, and you can talk the language and walk that talk, you're home free.
Yeah, the problem is, I'm not here today to talk about civil law or litigation. I'm here to talk about where things are actually going within our legislative system, not even our law system, okay? I'm not gonna, I would not disagree to anybody that the rule of law is functioning. It is not functioning. So I'm gonna say right out there, the rule of law does not exist, it is not functioning. And those that have been up on charges, anybody who's been charged over the last 5 years for engaging in any issue that was pushing back against the government, whether it was the Freedom Convoy, whether it was Coots, whether it was people like Tamara Leach, whether it was anyone at a protest, okay, we've seen repeatedly that those individuals get treated very differently than other people. We've also seen what's happening with a number of new immigrants to Canada on a federal level, where they're involved in certain crimes, criminal offenses, and we compare that to other people who are doing things that are tied to something, being at a protest and complaining about drag queen story time at a library in Alberta, and we see what happens. We see that difference in how serious violent criminals get out the next day on bail, and minor offenders on disruptive issues are staying in custody for a long period of time. Pastor Derek Reimer, who was in jail for a little bit of time, has recently now gone back in jail a few days ago because he would not make an apology to the librarian who was hosting the drag queen storytime event. And that was a condition of his release, that he would have to, and I had interviewed him on my podcast, and he knew he would be going back to jail because he was not intending to apologize for that disruption. So that's about as far as I want to go on that. I'm just going to open it up to, does anybody have any questions on something? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sandra.
so the NCI, just a little bit more information. They have all this information. What do they do with it?
Okay, so I can tell you some of the things they do with it, and I can't tell you some of the other things they do with it, because we shouldn't be talking about that.
Because, no, I just generally, like,
Yep, it'll say right on the NCI's
It does.
website, this is how helpful the information is, and that, by the way, here's some things that are being done with that information.
right,
So I can tell you that when all this information is unpacked, as it's been unpacked, and I become aware of it, I can guarantee you that I'm not the only one involved in meetings and litigation meetings. There are litigation meetings taking place all across the country by people saying, did you hear what that expert said? Did you hear what that expert said? Did you see that testimony? And then all of a sudden, these people who are testifying, their phones start ringing. And people are saying, that's very important. I can use you on a court case that I'm at. Can you come to my court case? Can you testify here? Or can we work together to push back and file civil litigation against the government? Because now we have enough experts who have testified saying things that we weren't even aware of. So in this case for example, in this case that I was telling you about earlier with the detective in Ottawa, so she's already been found guilty, and her sentencing hearing comes up this week. So they're gonna, something has been introduced, her lawyer introduced, saying, okay, she's already been found guilty, but now we're in the sentencing phase of the trial. And so we need to, her defense lawyer has the opportunity to submit some things into the court to say, look, you're going to sentence her, but we want you to consider these factors before you make your decision on sentencing her. And unlike the trial, where certain things can get introduced and certain things can't, when it comes to the sentencing decision, it's a much bigger door where you're allowed to just get more things in. to consider how bad you want to sentence her. You know, do you want to fire her? What's that penalty going to be? So as part of that, her lawyer has discovered a certain person who testified at the NCI and what that person said. And what that person was saying is, I've got all the freedom of information requests from what was going on in BC and Alberta from the Vaccine Vigilance Working Group, which is this federal working group with Health Canada right from the beginning of COVID. And I got all their emails. And I know who was talking to who and what they were saying. And I can tell you what they were saying. I can tell you they knew babies were dying. They were worried. They were concerned because they said these safety flags are going off. This is a problem. And that's what they're talking about in their emails. Yeah. And at the same time, the ministers of health in your province were saying, don't worry. If you're pregnant, that's okay. It's safe and effective. It's safe and effective. Take that vaccine. Well, they knew that babies were dying and they knew the safety signals were going off. So in answer to your question, you know, that person's testimony is part of the new stuff that's going in on that trial to say, hey, wait a minute, here's more stuff we want to get in. And now we already know, because we've been told, that defense for this detective's case, they're saying, no, we're not going to let any of that in.
Of course not, because
right?
that would set a major precedent.
Of course. So this is going to have to go to an appeals court in a proper courtroom, not a police disciplinary trial. It's going to go into a proper courtroom where all of this is going to come out. It's eventually it's going to come out.
Well, who is going to arrest those people?
But here's an example to answer her question. Here's an example of how is the NCI effective, is that we across Canada can't find each other. There's so many smart people in this country that are working on our side that have this research data, and it comes out at the NCI, it just percolates out. And if you're tuning into it, you'd say, hey, there's some real gold nuggets in here that we can use in our court cases. So we're not over. When it comes to our children safe in Canada, if you're concerned about your children, your grandchildren, this year's testimony is going to unpack a lot of stuff that's really important. So that's probably the best example
So
of how the information.
that
Yes,
and
exactly. But the NCI is completely volunteer run, and we count on donations from the public to keep it going. Because for the commissioners and the whole group to go to a city somewhere and hold a set of hearings for 3 or 4 days, that costs money. And then, 3 months later, you're going to another part of the country. 3 months later, you're going to another part. And everyone that works there, like myself, we don't draw a salary. We just donate our time.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, and two, back to like digital ID, what is your feeling on notices for non-consent to digital ID, at least standing up and saying, no, we don't want to consent to this?
Well, standing up, on this issue of standing up against it or pushing back,
Through a notice.
I mean, I have to say to people, like, how many people here have a cell phone? Right? Like, everybody here's got a cell phone. And it's like, if you don't want to be tracked, you're already embedded in the system.
It's not so much tracking, it's more so what they're doing with the information and how it's going through. Like, so with the children, for instance, it's going through the panorama system, which is it's the start of, tracking them for future, right? So we're teaching a lot about that particular subject because of what's happening in our school system today with the notices that are going home to parents that their kids can't go to school unless they're up to date with their records for public health. And so suspension notices are going out, and they're really 20-day suspension. Basically, they're coming to Niagara soon, again, second round. So, I mean, there's a bunch of privacy issues and sharing information across platforms. Yes, I agree with your statement that we're not going back to how it was before. But there is limitations on, what is encroaching on our privacy that we should be standing up for and saying no. And so, I've seen some notices that were they looked pretty good. Are they effective? is it gonna actually make a difference? Are there countries that are actually gonna back away from it a little bit? And as far as what your privacy going forward?
So, in answer to your question, another thing I just want to add to that layer of privacy is the information that the NCI has gleaned this year of Our Children Safe in Canada. You know, you may think this whole notion of digital ID is problematic when it comes to children, but that was never brought up at any hearing about the serious concerns about issues of children's safety and concerns. That wasn't even an issue brought up. And if it's an issue for you, it would have been great for you to come and unpack that and say, here's what I got. So what did come up as probably the biggest concern was actually not health services,
Public health?
yeah, public health.
Overreach?
Okay, public health and the family and child services, what goes on there and how tightly controlled they are. And so I'll give you an example. I had a mother reach out to me a couple months ago, and she said she brought one of her children to her doctor. It was a newborn, it was about 2 months old, and the doctor immediately was saying, okay, we're gonna give your child this vaccine and this vaccine and this vaccine. And the mother said, not a chance, you're not gonna do that. And I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly how the confrontation took place, but the doctor immediately said, I'm gonna have to file a letter to Children's Services. Children's Services got involved, and when they get involved, that mother was this close to losing her child over the comments, the disagreement she had with the doctor. So that's a really huge issue. And then Health Services said, okay, for the next year, we have to come in twice a week into your home and make sure your child's safe and okay, and sit down with your child for 10 minutes and interview your other children. So where we think that's a big problem, there are just so many problems when it does come to children, but the one that you're bringing up is important. It's an important issue.
I mean, it's a surveillance system, right?
A lot of surveillance.
Yeah. So the point I was trying to make there about the cell phones, and this is important, is we complain that we don't like surveillance.
Okay.
Yet we all carry cell phones with us. Or a lot of people here, I don't know how many people here have bonus cards, like loyalty cards, right? You know, when you go to checkout, do you have do you have an Optimum card? Do you have this card, or do you have that card? Because if you have this card and you're getting gas, you get 10 cents a liter off, right? That's all tracking and surveillance. You know, do you have a scene card? I always ask the cashier, do you know what that means? Do you know what it means having a scene card? They're like, no, it means like you get points. I go, yeah, do you know who pays for that? No. Do you know what they do with that? Do you know what they do with that information? No, of course you don't. And most people don't. They just think if I carry this card, I get points and I can get free groceries. It's like, that's all surveillance too.
Yeah.
However, they're not allowed to stop you from buying, and that's what it's gonna come to.
It will, yeah.
That's what it's gonna come to.
I mean, if you really want to see what's happening, look in a Walmart or a Costco, right? You go in there, they've already got the control mechanisms in place. It's just that next step, right? You're now conditioned to having to take out your ID card and scan it, and then you can go in, right? At one point, that's not gonna work.
Yeah.
As soon as you have the wrong politics, the wrong ideology, right, you're not
As
getting
soon
in.
as we have the.
So I just have one question about your group that you're involved with. So it
Which
sounds like
one? I'm involved in like 10 groups. The National
NCI.
Citizens Inquiry,
Yes.
yep.
So that, it sounds like that's spectacular, especially to know what evil or what wrong is going on within the country. However, my same concern, as all of us individuals, is there is nobody to protect the people of Canada, okay? The RCMP protects the federal government, the OPP protects the municipal government, the provincial government, and then the municipal police protect the municipal government. They
Yep.
don't there's nobody to protect us. There's nobody to speak for us. There's nobody to protect us. The RCMP don't protect us. They will go what the government says, and even if it goes against our natural law, our God's law, our government law, it doesn't matter. If the government says it, the RCMP's doing it, the OPP's doing it, and the municipal police are doing it, even if it's wrong.
Right,
They're
we know
going
that.
against the people. So
Right.
there's nobody out there for the people,
Right.
okay? So you're saying your group shows and it digs out and lets you know what the evil and badness is going on in the country. What do you do with that information though?
That's
Do
a very
you,
good
do you,
point.
do you do anything about it? You see that the
Okay,
the
so-
children are being.
Yeah, let me answer your question. So initially, a report gets generated, right? So the commissioners will generate a report. And the number one reason why the NCI started in the first place was a historical document reference to say, I don't care what the media spins, I don't care what you want to write and say that happened last year, happened during COVID. We're actually going to have hundreds and hundreds of people, if not thousands of people that have been interviewed telling their stories.
Yep.
And it's all going to be saved in a journal with a report saying, okay, these 600 people said this and this is what it means.
Right.
What they're all saying is this. So for historical reference into the future, if anyone's gonna gaslight you, you'll be like, no, take a look at this. And keep in mind, when the NCI, say, comes to Niagara, right, they will invite every member of parliament of this area, federal, provincial, and local. They'll invite them all. Come on, come and testify, come and listen. None of them come,
So I guess what
none of
I'm
them
saying
show
is
up.
if you hold all this information, and that information is proof that there's illegal stuff going on with children,
Right.
in the country, shouldn't there be something done about that instead of just the information being held?
So
Like,
there are things
something
being,
physically
there are
done
things
to
being
stop
done.
this from happening?
There are things being done, and I can't talk about that.
Does the ombudsman play a role in anything at all?
It's the same thing, they're all working for the same corporation.
Right, yeah.
It's all
But that's
foreign,
where I
it's
say
one
there's
hundred
nobody
percent
that
They
works
get
foreign.
for us.
invited,
Has
and they
nothing to do
choose
with
not to
Canada.
come, and then we
We're kind of
record
just
in the report the fact they were invited and they don't come. Like, we also invite the CBC and the national news, and they don't come,
We're
so
slaughtered.
we record that. Okay, so there's a historical reference, there's an inventory of expert witness testimony, larger than any other case that's happened. Like, we have more documented testimonies than Nuremberg trial. And this isn't, first of all, it's not a trial, but this is a very professional layout. We have lawyers, we have a lawyer that works for the NCI, and we have lead counsel, a lead lawyer, that guides the process legally. So this is a legal inquiry that's taking place. And everyone is testifying under sworn oath, okay? So the government does not want to acknowledge this. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to talk about it. It's too big. It's too embarrassing. And I can tell you, there have been 2 attempts to infiltrate the group and have it shut down and discredited. And both of them were discovered and shut down. And this came from the government.
But the
The
problem
government
is,
is trying to shut it down.
any of the lawyers,
Is there a question? Because if somebody wants to ask a question, otherwise everybody's talking at the same time. Yes.
So, the atmosphere that we're reviewing with distrust of the court system, and the court system being able to say, we just allow that information, I forget what you call it, there's a term, judicial prejudice.
Can you just speak up just a bit so everybody can hear?
Yeah, sorry. I'm just saying that with all the distrust that you and the rest of us feel with the government system, the courts, our founding, our organizations such as Health Canada, right? All of this distrust is fomenting rebellion.
Yes.
And you're getting underground people that are putting themselves in very precarious positions to try and carry out a sort of judicial kind of facsimile on a very low level. And what you're getting is people taking sides on that. So that it creates more division. It's one of the things that we're worried about is the division that's happening within our populace, right? So how do we go about making this right faster? Because what we're gonna have is rebellion, and then we're gonna have people put in jail who are good people, who are trying to do something right, but they're deemed criminal because of all these laws that are coming out, criminalizing people for speaking, saying the wrong thing, reading a testament from the Bible. So what's my question you're asking?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'm
what's the
rambling.
solution?
How are we going to have some immediate justification to people. How,
So she's looking for a solution like an immediacy.
Yes.
And I can tell you my greatest frustration, because I'm interested in that as well. I'm solutions-based.
yes.
So I've been to so many meetings with so many groups, with so many people, and the biggest one in Canada is called Freedom Rising, and they meet on Fridays, and there's hundreds of people in this meeting from freedom groups from all across the country, and they're having the same conversation. And I'm gonna give you an example. So I 2 years ago, I stopped going to these meetings. I got so frustrated with the lack of cooperation, and I left these meetings. And I'll tell you why, is I finally put it to the group of 500 people in a meeting. And I said, okay, everybody's going off in a different direction, right? Nobody's flying in the same direction. Everybody's got a different issue, different complaint. My complaint's more important. No, this one's more important. No, this one's more important. And you're not gonna get anywhere in a group of what we call freedom leaders across the country who can't even agree on what the problem is, let alone introduce a solution. So I got very frustrated at that, saying nobody wants to listen. Everybody wants to yell and complain about something, but nobody wants to listen. So I addressed the whole group and I said to the group, here's what I want from you. I want your 3 top categories of what you think are the 3 most important things that are plaguing this nation at this time. Not something you can fix in your own community, but what's the biggest problem in the nation. Okay, do you understand that? So here's my email, so just email me your top 3, and then from there, I can take all the information and say from all the people in this meeting, apparently these are the top 3. These are the biggest, most important issues. Now we have a starting point of what we can focus on and we can agree upon, right? So a week later, I was supposed to go back to the next meeting and report on the results. And I reported, I said, okay, you're gonna be really surprised what I found. And I said, what I found was what I thought I would find, only worse. 2% of the entire group of 500 people actually responded to this email. So here's your number 1 problem. Ineffectiveness, you won't even get off your seat and send me an email of what your top 3 issues are, okay? So here, you guys are meeting every Friday, but when I asked you a simple question, just tell me what your top 3 issues are, 2%. And those 2%, I recognized every name as the same 2% who do everything all the time. You know what I mean? You get the same people who do everything all the time, and then the rest.
Same 10 people that claim.
Exactly. So I said to the group, you're not prepared to engage. And this just happened recently where I'm now networking through my podcast. I'm networking with a number of police officers from across the country, former police officers, who give me credit. And they say, I love what you're doing. I love your podcast. You're doing exactly the right thing. It's fantastic. I'm giving you credit. Great. Why don't you come on my podcast? Oh, I don't do that. I don't speak publicly. I said, you are wasting my time. You want to give me credit, but you don't want to come on a podcast and talk.
What's the name of your podcast?
Deprived Justice, it's on Rumble. So that lady there has had her hand up for so long, she has a
You know
question.
my name, Ben. Come on.
I'm just gonna call you that lady.
Alright, I'm that lady, you guys. I was under the impression this was gonna be a talk about digital ID. Can you make your one main point?
On digital ID, it's gonna happen.
So,
Alright.
yeah, I don't disagree.
If that's the main point,
Is
is there
there
another speaker?
things that we can do to minimize the effect on each one of us personally? And that might be different for everybody. Like, is there something we can do to protect ourselves? Would a notice protect yourselves?
Like a legal, on the legal side of things?
Well, a notice.
It's going to be a very slow phase-in period. So when the digital IDs eventually come out, it'll be tied to something really simple and not very nefarious, but slowly over time, it'll get tied into banking and financing quick enough, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And so can you stay out of it? Well, you can do what you want, right?
So your
Individually.
point earlier was the only way we can really kind of move through all of this is to come together separately as a community and start building our own networks
But then
within.
they're gonna come after us eventually too.
You know, maybe,
That's the problem.
maybe not.
I'm
Like,
really believing in the point that she brought up earlier, that
Yeah.
there'll be a revolution, and I
Yeah,
seriously
yeah.
believe there will be a revolution in this
Yeah.
country. And it may start, I think if anywhere, it's gonna start in the UK first,
it's hard.
because they are the most advanced in the draconian measures,
Yeah,
and it's gonna spill over to other nations very quickly. So just look at the UK, what's going on there. It's a lot worse than we have it here. Let's
It
see what
definitely
happens there
is.
before, yeah.
but as far as protecting ourselves, like, you know, being out of the banks, investing in precious metals, like, you know, things like that, you know, they're not gonna get their hands on.
Well, I'm not about to tell anybody how to
No,
invest their money,
exactly,
but I do
they're
tell you to invest in relationships. So I don't
relationships.
care if everyone in this room is my friend, what I care about the people who I can trust in this room.
Yeah.
So if there's 5 people in this room that are trustworthy, those are the people I want to adhere to.
Yeah.
Right? I want to be with people who I can trust. Not like lots of people, just people who I can trust. Because what good are people if you can't trust them,
No, 100%.
right? That's it.
Having people share different ideas on what they can do to opt out of the digital IDs or the digital currency that they want to bring in.
That'll be your choice, right? That's your personal choice. You might be in a position to be able to opt out forever and live in a tent out on some
cabin in the
land
woods.
somewhere, and it might work for you, but other people might just find it too hard and too inconvenient and say, yeah, I know, but I can't. It just doesn't work for me because of my kids, because of my job, because of my situation, right? We all walk in a different set of shoes, and, you know, if anybody knows who Jeremy McKenzie is, no?
Yes.
Okay, so if you do, I had him on my podcast 3 weeks ago. And when I introduced him, it was highly, highly controversial because he's a very highly controversial person. And I introduced him by talking about the shoes that I walked in the course of my career. And I walked in a lot of bad stuff. And I did a lot of stuff that most people would not want to have to do. And then I was able to redirect to Jeremy, having been in the military and watch his friends get blown up. And the only thing left is a boot and part of a leg sticking out. And seeing that repeatedly, I did not walk in those boots. I don't know, and I'm glad I didn't, and I don't ever want to walk in those boots. But he's going to have to spend the rest of his life dealing with what he's dealing with. And so when it comes to the answer of like, so what do we do with digital ID? Well, what boots are you in? What's your situation? How can you make it work? And the more people that you're tied with, the friendly you are, right? So I want to spend the rest of my life working on myself and being the best person I can. And hopefully people will gravitate to me in a positive way if I am. So I can only work on me. That's what I'm working on, is me. Okay, I hope that's helped.
Yeah, I mean, it does, yeah, I agree with that last statement, working on yourselves definitely.
Yeah, maybe I kind of
important.
stirred the bee's nest in this room and I've
No, I
agitated
just think,
everybody.
you know, it's a grim reality. If we stay in that reality, we don't have to stay in that reality. We can create positive, you know, positivity within our group, within our friends group, and try and, you know, keep the joy and alive and do the best we can. But I think community is super important in that process because, you know, we're gonna have to help each other out, bottom line. And I think, you know, we should
Yeah,
be.
because I'm not going digital. I'll die on my feet before I ever do
Well, I mean,
anything
there's,
like that. So I'll go to the
we
bush and
already
I'll
are to
survive
some
until I
degree.
can, but it's not happening for me.
And there's, because we know it's starting as for our benefit, for ease of whatever, we
It's
know.
for your safety.
For our
Yeah,
safety,
yeah,
like, you know,
safety.
we know that, we know that path, and that's where the revolution, I agree, is gonna come from. There will be a rebellion
hope
against
so.
a
You're
lot of
gonna have
different
a
things.
rebellion
I
when
hope.
people realize that they aren't gonna get their pension check, they're not gonna get their CPP.
But that's
They
gonna come after digital's already been in place.
No,
and
they're
that's
saying
when they start
already,
to-
They're already,
already,
yeah.
if you if you don't enroll in the digital system, you will not get any government gratuity.
Oh, no, I'm saying everybody's gonna sign up for it at first, because they're gonna make it seem like it's not a big deal. It's not gonna be until a year or so after when they start to say, okay, well, we don't like how you think about this, so you're not getting your check this week, or you're on a credit score system now, and now you're not gonna get this amount.
But now they're already saying, if you
It's gonna be
don't
too
sign
late.
up for it, you won't get, now,
And you
some of
write
us
them-
here are on
You
pension.
write them a
You
letter.
will not get that anymore.
Write them a letter, it's a contract, it's an
Yeah.
offer to contract.
But-
So you write them a letter and say, thank you for your offer. I'd like to say no, I'd like to keep things the way that they are. Easy version.
I'd like to keep things the way they are.
Absolutely, let's do everything, let's do everything.
They won't even answer me.
Let's
This
don't
could
the
be an
difference
automated
between,
request,
I
right?
agree with that.
Yeah, reply, to say, nice to hear from you.
Objective.
Like I said, we are going to
And a
be
feeling
as a
that-
group,
and a feeling.